Let's start first off by basically explaining who I am. My name is Ed Zamora. I'm actually essentially a retired financial aid officer, helping out the high schools now for about 23 years. So I've been a financial aid director. I've worked with admissions, the billing office, the records office, pretty much the bursar's office, pretty much every facet you can within the college realm per se. So throughout the presentation, if you guys have any questions, just ask away. That being said, let's talk about the landscape, because one of the questions I know the guidance offices have sent me before and have sent me now for tonight's presentation is kind of what's going on. So we're going to cover the landscape of the college admissions and financial aid process the way we see it now, everything going on based on the pandemic situation. We're also obviously going to discuss the financial aid and admissions situations, how they're being impacted by everything. Also, one of the big questions out there is always the SAT optional situation, how that's affecting the financial aid side, which we will cover. We're also going to talk about building your college list, the safety, target, and reach schools, not so much from an admissions point of view, but we will discuss a little bit there. We're going to really discuss it based on the financial aid situation, how the list should be built or it should be looked at. We're going to talk about obviously appeals, how to ask for more money, how to negotiate, especially in the world that we live in now, a lot of job losses, unfortunately. Now, one of the things that basically every guidance has asked me to do for the last 5 or 6 years now, as well as the guidance offices here today that having me host today's presentation, is they've all asked me if I could put the videos like this video here tonight on the YouTube channel or on a YouTube channel for parents to see. So we basically started a YouTube channel about 3.5, maybe 4 months ago. We have now around 35 videos. We have like another 5 videos going up this week, not just of this presentation, but covering every topic. Work study programs, scholarships, grants, where to find scholarships online, the community college situation, the gap year. We talk about pretty much everything. We even have a video just on why you fill out the FAFSA form. We also talk about the common made errors on the FAFSA form. I talk about the SAT, ACT optional stuff. I talk about everything on the YouTube channel. So if you want more college content, the easiest thing to do is just go onto YouTube, type my name in, Ed Zamora. You can even subscribe. If you subscribe, it notifies you. Once again, I post anywhere from 1 to 5 videos every week from just the questions parents are asking me over and over again. I just post the videos on there to help give you guys more content. This week, we're going to be posting a video about the early action, early decision situation with financial aid, as far as restricted early action as well, and regular enrolling, how it affects financial aid, the way you're applying to college. We have a video for that just going up this week as well, because I've had about 100 parents ask me about that, so I just figured I'd make the video. So if you go on the YouTube channel, it's a lot more in depth. There's 35, almost 40 videos on there now. This presentation usually takes about an hour and 15 minutes. I have over, I think, 30 hours content online, so I'm not going to keep you on here that long. That being said, let's talk about the 3 different groups of students out there right now. And for those who aren't, I guess, familiar with this whole process, there's different groups of students out there. And I don't mean like junior and senior different type of students. I mean, as far as different groups of students in this category. The first group of students right now who are in the worst group based on the pandemic and everything going on are the students who are leaving college or essentially had graduated in May or June of 2020. The reason they're in the worst group is because right now they're in the worst economic unemployment situation that we've had in forever almost. So unemployment rate is way high, so it makes it very difficult for them to find work. That's problem number 1 for the students who graduated. Problem number 2 for the students who graduated in December, if not in January, at the beginning of January at least, all these student loans that have gone into forbearance, or the students who had the grace period of 6 months before they graduated, or after they graduated, all that's being given up. So students may not have jobs, but they have to start paying back their student loans, unfortunately. Making matters even worse, the second group are the students who've gone back to college. Now, the reason the students who've gone back to college are in a difficult situation is because of the fact that they're going back to a college setting, a college environment they're not used to. They're used to socializing, going out, hanging out, being with their friends, going to parties, so on and so forth. They're used to going to classrooms, auditoriums, these kind of things, things that aren't going to happen this year, unfortunately. So football, tailgates, that kind of stuff is not going to happen. So for them, they're in the second worst group, especially the senior students who were going into senior year of college thinking they were going to have, this is the senior year, the best time of their lives scenario, and it's kind of been erased, unfortunately. So the third group of students is the group I'm talking about here tonight, the seniors and below, juniors and so on and so forth. You guys are technically, from my perspective, in the best camp when it comes to students because of the fact that for senior parents specifically, one of the first things that's been eliminated this year is the barrier of entry into admissions by basically subtracting the SAT, ACT requirement. That's a huge barrier for a lot of students. Many cases where you have a good student who does academically well, either by taking very hard courses as well as doing very well on the GPA side, who can't score well on the SAT, ACT. That barrier has not been eliminated. Also, another key component this year, specifically for students who are looking to do early decision 1, early decision 2, or restricted early action, one of the three. Basically, the first two lock you in. Early decision 1, early decision 2, lock you in. Restricted early action is kind of a hybrid in between, doesn't lock you in, but it kind of falls in the same category of a higher percentage of students typically accept it. Excuse me. Now, when it comes to the early decision for senior students specifically, this is probably going to be the lightest competition you guys will have for early decision candidates because of the fact that, number one, very low competition from international students. So very likely international students will not be a huge part of this criteria. Number two, the second reason it's going to be that way is because many students aren't going to elect not to do early decision because they don't want to be locked into a college they've never seen before. So in many cases, you have to look at it from the senior perspective of where are my benefits and how can I maximize it. For junior parents and below, obviously, more than likely, the schools that want SAT, ACT optional this year based on the pandemic might not be there next year, but you never know. So what I would be doing if I'm a junior parent or junior family, as I'm putting together my college list, I'm calling each one of these schools and asking them, will you continue doing SAT, ACT optional, yes or no? Now, it's highly unlikely that Harvard, Yale, Stanford, these level of schools will continue doing SAT, ACT optional, but it's not out of the realm of possibility. The University System of California, the biggest university system in the world, went SAT, ACT optional this year and has elected to go SAT, ACT optional forever. So it might be one of those things where it keeps going down that road. You never know. So for juniors and below, I would be asking these questions of admissions. Let me just check a couple questions here for you guys. We will get to the FAFSA stuff as far as trust and savings accounts in a moment. The question about the SAT waiver, for those wondering, the SAT's always provided waivers. Typically, if you sign up for the SAT and elect to send your test scores in immediately, many times they will give you up to 6 submissions for free. So the waiver is not something that's new this year. Okay? That being said, let's talk about one question I've been getting across the board from basically every presentation I've been doing. And this is really a question I've been getting for the last 5 years. When your students are filling out their applications of admissions, one thing that most families kind of find odd is when you're filling out the common application, which you see on the screen right now, the common application itself, is on the common application, every college will now ask you one specific financial aid question, which kind of makes parents wonder, why is the common application for admissions asking us about financial aid? You see that on the left-hand side, it shows all the different colleges this student's applying to. And by this student, I mean me, because I do a common app every year to kind of see what the changes are and just to be able to, converse with parents and make sure I'm, up to speed on the admissions side. So I do a common app myself every year. As you see on BU, so I started with BU, I just clicked on BU's questions. And by the way, every school asks this question now. It's not just BU. Every school that asks for the common app, by the way. So I clicked on the questions, and if you look at the bottom, on question 4 of the questions that BU wants us, as far as students, to specifically answer, question number 4 says, do you intend to apply for need-based financial aid? Now, obviously, that's a big question, kind of a red flag in some parents' eyes, where why is a college asking us if we're applying for need-based aid for financial aid purposes on the admissions forms? Well, if you want to know, is your school looking at your family financially as a component to be accepted to the college? Very simple way to find out if it's yes or no, because now every college asks that question whether they do or not, unfortunately. First thing you need to do, call the admissions office. You call the admissions office and you ask them, is your school need aware? That's the term you need to use. If the admissions office says, yes, we are need aware, that means they are looking at you as a financial component in the admissions kind of roundtable scenario of will we accept a student based on this criteria, they need aid. Now, many schools are not need aware. They don't care if you can afford it or not. So even if you check off yes here, make sure to call the school and just double check if you want to kind of have, a peace of mind. If the admissions office says no, they're not need aware, which is, by the way, also what's known as need blind, or the new term for need blind, for those who are wondering. Second phone call to make is the financial aid office. And you want to make sure both the admissions and financial aid office, both departments say no, we are not looking at you as a financial component of the admissions consideration. That's what you want to make sure. Now, let's say that your school says to you, yes, they are looking at you from a financial point of view of accepting your student. The reality is it's not the number one component. So it doesn't automatically knock you out of your student getting accepted situation. The way it typically works is this. Let's say there's 10 spots left for admissions, just giving you a round number. I mean, the numbers vary at every college. You have 30 students left, and your student's one of the 30 left for those 10 spots. Yes, the first people they're going to take are the ones who say they do not need financial aid consideration. That being said, if your student is not accepted to the college, they're not going to tell you why they didn't accept your student. So if you're thinking it's a financial component, you're never going to know. But if you need financial aid, you must check off. You need to check off, yes, I'm applying for need-based aid because of this reason. 2 years ago, up until now, this academic term, 2021, we're in right now, then you guys are applying for 21-22. These last 2 years, a few different colleges have gone together and basically said, if you do not apply for financial aid the first year, if you say, no, we don't want financial aid the first year, we're going to bar you from applying for financial aid the second year. So as you may have already noticed from doing the research and figuring out the college cost, some of these schools range in cost from $50, $60, $70, even $80,000 a year. So if your school costs $80,000 and you indicate, no, I am not applying for need-based aid, think you might have to look at it from a 2-year perspective. Your college might bar you. So it's $160,000 you're on the hook for. So for me, if you need aid, always check yes on the application for admission saying, we are looking for aid, we do need assistance. That being said, I have a few of you guys popping up questions. Let me just pop up the questions here. And for the people asking the questions about the merit aid, I will discuss merit aid in about 2 slides. And I will discuss, also this question as well, what financial aid actually is. That being said, let's go on to the next part of the presentation. Now, when you're building a college list, what most families look at from the college list perspective, or I guess the students look at, is there's 3 different tiers when it comes to the building the college list. You have the safety schools, the target schools, and the reach schools. Now, the safety schools are pretty much the slam dunks. I'm definitely going to get in. Obviously, work with your guidance office. They're very well knowledgeable in this field of how this works, of which schools your students will definitely get into based on the safety list. So check with guidance to figure out which schools are safety schools. The second part of every list will be target schools, which are basically 50-50 chance of getting in. It's likely you're going to get in, but not guaranteed scenario. And the third level is the reach schools, the dream colleges, essentially the more difficult schools to get into. That's the admissions way of looking at a list. The financial aid way of looking at a list is this. Your goal, because every list has at least 1 to 3 safety schools. Now, of your list, of those 1 to 3 safety schools, your number one goal is making sure these safety schools provide your student with scholarship consideration. Now, the reason you want to make sure that these schools provide you scholarship consideration, specifically the safety schools, is because since your student is guaranteed in here, and it's a very likely scenario where your student's very sought after by this kind of college, they're probably going to offer them very good scholarship money. So what you do with that is you take the scholarship money from the safety schools as a leveraging tool to try to get more money from the target and the reach colleges. So think of the safety schools as basically kind of, I already have some money on the table. Can you match it? Can you work with me kind of scenario? It's a good negotiating kind of scenario. That's the way you should look at it from a financial aid consideration of your college list. Good question. When you're calling the school, whether you're calling the admissions office or the financial aid office, the way it works is this. If it's anything to do as far as who makes the phone call I'm talking about, guys. So if the question you're asking is an admissions question as far as the application, the essay, program, so on and so forth, the person calling should always be the student. If it's a question about money, any kind of money, scholarships, grants, loans, any money type questions should always be the phone call made by the parent. So when you're calling the admissions office, and also here for the safety schools, if you want to find out, does your school offer scholarship money? Contact the admissions office. You can call them, you can email them. Some of them are even doing Zoom meetings now with the families, parents, and students. So one of the first questions I'm asking the admissions office, once I know what my safety school list is, number one, does my student qualify for scholarship money? You can even just over the phone tell them, this is my student's GPA out of a 4-point scale. This is my student's test scores, if I did or didn't take them. You can ask the admissions office, based on these 2 criteria, are we scholarship eligible? And they can tell you right over the phone, yes or no, because of the fact that most schools have an index, a certain GPA and test score line up, and that's what basically says to them, yes, you get scholarship money, or you don't. If the school says to you, yes, you're scholarship eligible, the next question you should ask the admissions office, the second question you should ask them immediately is, can we get more? Is there a way to get more? So if you're going to give us, let's say, the trustee scholarship as an example of $8,000 to $10,000, what's the next level? Is the next level the presidential? And if it is the presidential, how much more is that? And is it possible for us to obtain that if we do well academically in senior year? Your goal is always to lock in scholarship funding. Now, scholarship money is handled, by the way, by the admissions office. Grant money, also part of financial aid free money, is handled by the financial aid office. So any scholarship questions go to the admissions office. If you're calling about scholarships, you can, as a parent, call on your student's behalf. If it's an essay question, a major question, anything else kind of question admissions-wise, it should be the student. Now, once again, that's the way you build a list as far as a financial aid component of the way you look at things. And the reason why, for parents listening tonight, that your number one goal is to maximize scholarships is because scholarships are guaranteed for 4 years. They're the best part of any financial aid package in most cases, because this scholarship, if you can lock it in, it's discounts across the board for 4 years. On top of that, there's no financial aid forms requirement. So you're just basically getting the money and hopefully trying to maximize it, and then you have it locked in. Your financial aid forms are irrelevant for scholarship money. That being said, let's talk about when it comes to the landscape of college now when students have entered college, something that's been going on now for almost a decade, even before the pandemic hit, is that students are taking longer than 4 years to graduate a 4-year program. Most students now are taking, unfortunately, 5 and 6 years to graduate 4-year programs. Now, I'm going to ask you guys to write this down. And by the way, when I say write this down, I mean it's very important for you guys to write this down. You should all write down that your student needs to accomplish line number 1, basically 120 plus college credits to graduate. Now, whether they do that in 3 years, 4, 5, or 6, it's irrelevant to the college, but it's obviously relevant to you. So your goal is to get your student to get 120 plus credits within 4 years to get them in and out in 4 years. And the reason I'm telling you to get them in and out in 4 years is because in the world of college, there's no such thing as a 5-year scholarship. There's no such thing as a 5 or 6 year grant. So if your student takes an extra year, an extra 2 years, which has now become more prevalent, basically what happens is you must now take on more loan debt, or you must come out of pocket with more money, which obviously we don't want to do. So to get your student in and out of college within the 4 years, this is what you need to do. Let's first discuss why this is happening, which is line number 2. Line number 2 is basically how every college starts off a student. And this is what I mean by starts off a student. When you're looking at your tuition bill, whatever your tuition bill is for the year, they cut it in half. So let's say your tuition bill is $20,000 for whatever college you're thinking about. So you're paying $10,000 in tuition bill fall, $10,000 tuition bill spring. Now you're paying that same amount of tuition money as long as your student is taking 12 to 18 college credits. You should write that down too. You're paying the same amount of money. Your bill is exactly the same as long as your student is taking 12 to 18 college credits. Now the problem becomes every college will start your student at 12 to 13 college credits, not to keep them there longer. That's not their goal. They're starting them at this low level to essentially let them basically kind of get used to the process. Rather than overwhelming them, they kind of ease them into the college process by limiting them just taking 12 to 13 credits. Now that limitation is okay in the first fall semester. The problem becomes, line number 2, when your student keeps taking 12 credits per semester. Because if they keep taking the bare minimum of full-time student, what happens is at the end of year 4, that student only has 96 college credits. Essentially, they are essentially 1 year short of graduating. Line number 3 is what you're trying to get accomplished. Line number 3 is your student must average 15 college credits. As long as they average 15 per semester, at the end of the 4th year, then in line 3, you'll see they have 120 credits in line to graduate on time. The easiest way to make sure that line 3 happens and not line number 2, at the college, you should write this down as well. I have a video for this as well, but I'm going to explain to you what the importance is here. At every college, in the billing office, sometimes known as the bursar's office or the records office, you can even ask admissions where to fill this out later on if you want to. Every school has what's known as a FERPA form, F-E-R-P-A. The FERPA form at the college level allows your student to provide access to any information they have on the campus. So any academic information, any financial information, etc. Without the FERPA form being filled out by your student, granting you access, basically putting your name on there, you cannot ask any questions of the college at all. Now, you might be wondering, well, if we call there, why do they tell us the billing amount and how much we owe? They do that as a courtesy. They're not supposed to do that. They're not supposed to tell anyone the bill amount of the student other than the student. The only reason they tell the parents is they realize you guys are paying the bill. But legally-ish speaking, they're not supposed to do that. Now, the reason you want to get the FERPA form done is because the FERPA form grants you access academically as well as financially to the student's account. The FERPA form allows you to call their academic advisor, you should write that down too, it's a very important term, their academic advisor, and ask them questions such as, what's my student's GPA? We're 2 years into college. Will we graduate in 2 years? Is there anything you see on the schedule here that might delay us from graduating in the 4-year time frame? You can even ask this individual, is my student going to class? Because they keep track of this for financial aid purposes. So it's your way of making sure that everything kind of falls in line and your student gets in and out in that 4-year time frame. So the FERPA is very important. So important, I made a video just on that as one of the 5 top important forms to have filled out on the YouTube channel. That being said, let's talk about the SAT ACT optional scenario. Now, when it comes to the SAT ACT optional, obviously a lot of parents, a lot of students are wondering kind of how is this all kind of taking hold in the world of financial aid, not just admissions. But when it comes to the SAT ACT optional, there was 1,000 colleges that were SAT ACT optional before this whole thing happened. So let me just put that out there already. So it's not like they all just jumped on the SAT ACT optional bandwagon. Now there are 1,600 of them now, so 600 or so jumped on board just in the last 6 months. So it was a tremendous increase. That being said, if you're considering going SAT ACT optional for senior parents, I'm going to talk about juniors and stuff in a second, but senior parents first. If you're looking for schools, this is the website where you need to go. At the bottom of the screen there, you see the actual website, fairtest.org/university/optional. See, I'm going to just do this here because I see a couple of you guys can't see the bottom of the screen, so I'll just move this over here so you guys can see it. Excuse me, for the parents who can't see it. This is where you guys need to go to fill out or to figure out which schools are SAT ACT optional. At this point, just think they're basically all SAT ACT optional. Now, the first question, once again, back to the admissions office from a financial aid point of view. The first question every student, every parent should be doing as far as calling the financial aid office or the admissions office, admissions specifically, by the way, you should be all asking this question if you're going SAT ACT optional of the admissions office. If we don't send test scores in, will this be used against us for scholarship consideration? Now, before the whole pandemic hit, 9 out of 10 colleges did not use you not sending test scores in against you for scholarship consideration. So if you didn't send them in and the school was SAT ACT optional, obviously you had to do that, then they would not use it against you. So you're still getting scholarship consideration. Based on everything happening as far as the economy and everything else, and the schools not making their numbers, many of them not getting the amount of students coming in that they expected, it's highly unlikely those schools are going to elect this year to start saying across the board, if you don't send in test scores, we're not going to give you scholarship consideration. Before the pandemic, it was like 9 out of 10 schools would still award you. During the pandemic, I would be surprised if it went to 8 out of 10. I'd be surprised if it went anything less than that, like 7 out of 10. I'd be shocked because of the fact that many colleges still have billions of dollars in their endowments or hundreds of millions in their endowments. So for them, in many cases, the scholarship money is kind of irrelevant, to be honest with you. Yes, it makes sense for you guys and it helps you guys, but for them, it's kind of drop in the bucket in many cases. So very unlikely I would see a lot of schools across the board not elect to give scholarship money based on the student going SAT, ACT optional. Now, the second group of students we're talking about here tonight, juniors and below. For junior parents, once again, if you're building your list, contacting the schools and asking them, is your school going to stay SAT, ACT optional? You guys should also be asking, if we next year decide to go SAT, ACT optional, if you still have it, we'll use that against us for scholarship consideration. For juniors and below, this informational session tonight is all for you guys to gather as much knowledge of the process as possible to kind of get ahead of the curve for next year. That being said, let me just check a quick question here. Good question. Can you ask about scholarship eligibility before acceptance? And the answer is yes. You can ask about scholarship eligibility before your student is accepted because many schools have metrics. So they kind of link up your GPA and your test scores to kind of see where you would be if you were accepted to college to receive scholarship consideration. And let me just move this over here a little bit. And let me just make sure I just click here that it answers your questions, guys. So you guys can just keep asking questions away, guys. Once again, put the questions in the Q&A. You see one question just popped up. Good question. Is there an advantage if your student has a good SAT or ACT score? And obviously, a good SAT or ACT score is dependent upon your school that you're applying to, but to give you an example, most scholarship money for colleges that provide scholarship aid, typically around the 1,350, 1,300 mark. It's kind of when you start reaching the high levels of scholarship money on the SAT side. On the ACT, it's roughly the 30 to 32 range is typically when you start seeing kind of like you're starting in either in the middle or the maximum level of scholarship money you'd be getting. So if you do have a good SAT, ACT score, I probably would send it in for scholarship consideration, but of course it depends on the college. It also depends on your major. This is one of those broad questions I tell you guys about because I don't know the school list. I don't know what your students' rigor is, if they have APs, IBs, honors, and everything else. But just assume from a generic point of view, broad point of view, the 1,350 mark around there, the 30 to 32 ACT is when scholarship money comes in for schools that do give scholarship money. Anything above that, you're kind of already hitting the max, okay? I see two more questions pop up. Let me just read these two guys, and then we'll jump right back on the presentation here. The person who's asking me, was it easier to get into reach colleges before the pandemic? I can't really answer that question because I don't know what you mean by reach schools. For some of you, Harvard will be a reach. For others of you, County will be a reach, to be honest with you. So I can't really answer your question, unfortunately. If you want, for any questions you guys provide me that are very broad, I do provide my information at the end as far as my phone number and my email. I ask you, if I just say to you, just email me your question, it's basically because I have to ask you more questions like what's the school list, what's the GPA, what's your income, these kind of questions before I can actually answer your question, okay? I want to look at the next two questions and we're going to jump right back on the presentation here, guys. For the early decision students, as far as scholarship money, you can still appeal and ask for more money. Early decision does not mean you're locked in and you're finished as far as yes, it means you're locked in, you're going. Early decision means that, yes. So early decision 1, early decision 2 means you basically sign a contract saying, yes, you will go. But it doesn't mean you're automatically stopped from asking for more money. So early decision doesn't automatically stop you from negotiating, which I'll talk about in a moment. So I think I covered all 4 questions here. Let me just click on answered, guys, and then we'll move on here. Once again, for the SAT question, one of the SAT questions was, should we elect to send scores to certain schools? You can elect to send scores to specific colleges, but I wouldn't say I would suggest that, unfortunately. Once again, I don't know what your college list is. So there will be some schools that just don't care. Let me give you an example. Just this week, Cornell, their architecture program, up until a week ago, Cornell said, you must send in test scores. Now Cornell this week said, do not send test scores, and even if you do send test scores, we're not going to look at them. So even if you had a 1600, Cornell's architecture program will not look at it. So unfortunately, for your specific questions, or the broad questions you guys are asking me, I can't really give you an answer. So as far as if you should send test scores in or not, check with the guidance office. You guys have great guidance departments. I've been working with them for years. Other than that, if you want to email me the question and I can ask you more questions, I can be more, I guess, thorough with your questions. That being said, let's talk about the price tags as far as cost. Obviously, across the board, United States-wise, the university costs on the public side range from $14,000 to $30,000. Problem is, here in the tri-state area, we have way more expensive colleges as far as state and public universities. Our state and public universities range in cost from $18,000 to $40,000. On the private side, we're also more expensive than nationwide. Our private schools start at around $40,000 to $45,000 and go all the way up to $60,000. And then when you're looking at the more expensive colleges, the higher tier, most likely the private universities in most cases, you're looking at the new normal cost for everything included, room, board, books, the whole thing, is now basically $70,000 is the new norm in the world of college expenses. Now you're probably looking at the list here and you're seeing Columbia, NYU, GW, Fairleigh Dickinson. I'm one of the alumni. Fairleigh Dickinson also was the director of financial aid there for a while. One of them. When it comes to these college costs, you might be sitting there wondering, you know, $80,000 is a lot to spend for an education. One of the things I'm thinking about doing is taking schools off the list because of the fact they're too expensive. This is actually the worst thing you could possibly do. The number one error I see in 23 years of doing this from an admissions point of view is always the same, basically. You take schools off the list because you look at the price tag and you wonder, we can't afford it. Maybe I don't even make $80,000 a year. I can't send my student. I'm not going to let them apply. That's the worst thing you can do. what you need to do is the homework. And I'm going to start doing the homework about what you guys need to do as far as how to do the homework and figuring out if colleges are generous for you and in general, specifically, right after I explain that these schools here, a majority of the students, almost half, in some cases even more than half of the students going into these universities, pay half the sticker price. So never look at the sticker price and assume you can't afford it. First, you have to start doing the homework. And here is where the homework begins. In the world of college, there's typically two different languages being spoken. There's parent language, basically the family language, and there's financial aid office language. And this is what I mean by two different languages. In the world of college, as far as the financing of the college, the financial aid itself, the term financial aid means four things. It means scholarships and grants, which are known as gift aid. You should write that term down, very important. Scholarships and grants, as well as loans and work programs. So the term financial aid means four things. Scholarships, grants, gift aid, free money, loans, money you must pay back, and work programs, money you should work towards. Now, when you're talking to a financial aid office, admissions office, anyone from the college, and you start talking about financial aid, this is what I mean by you guys are talking two different languages. The parents that I've talked to for the last 23 years or so, when they're talking about financial aid, they're talking about grants and scholarships. When the financial aid office is talking about financial aid, they're talking about the free money and loans. So you want to make sure that once this discussion starts, that you bring up the fact that, yes, we're talking about financial aid, but our family wants to talk about specifically the gift aid portion. That way you guys aren't talking two different languages, okay? You want to make sure you're on the same page. Reason being, if you keep bringing up financial aid, they keep hearing, can we get loans? And the answer is always yes. There's always loans available for college. There's always work programs available for college. But most families are not talking to the financial people about loans, and they don't want to talk about work programs. They want to talk about gift aid, the free stuff. Which brings us to, how do colleges determine how much financial aid you should be getting, i.e. grant money, the free money you're not paying back? So we talked admission stuff with scholarship money. We're going to talk about scholarships a little bit more in a moment. But first, let's veer over to the financial aid department here with the grants, the other side of the free money. Now, there's three components to figuring out if you are eligible for grant money at any college. The equation you see on the screen now is what every college uses, from county to Harvard and everything in between. When it comes to figuring out if you're eligible for grant aid, the first component is called the cost of attendance. Now, the cost of attendance is what the college costs, everything included. And I'll show you what goes in that for 1 year in the next slide. So you take what the college costs, everything included, the cost of attendance, subtract out what's known as the expected family contribution. The expected family contribution is the amount they think you can pay towards the college cost, for one student for one academic year. They get the expected family contribution number from you guys filling out the financial aid forms. So once you fill out the financial aid forms, the expected family contribution number they give you, this is something also that families unfortunately don't understand, or I guess don't properly understand in many cases. When the financial aid forms say to you, this is your expected family contribution, how much you're supposed to pay towards college, it does not mean in any way this is all you're paying towards the college cost. It means this is the minimum you're paying towards the college cost. You might be paying more. So you subtract out what they expect you to pay at least from the total cost. What's left over is the financial need. When it comes to financial need, this is what the school should help you with in scholarships, grants, loans, and work programs. Now, the reason I say the word should, there's no guideline, there's no rule saying they have to help you out at all. As you go through this whole process, you're going to notice some schools are very generous, some schools not generous at all. And I will show you two ways of figuring out tonight if the schools you're looking at are generous specifically to you. That being said, once again, guys, I do have a slide just on negotiation. This is like the fourth question I've gotten from you guys about negotiation. I can't explain negotiation until I explain to you guys what financial aid is, but there is a specific slide on negotiations, yes. So I will get that in a moment, okay? So what goes into cost of attendance? Cost of attendance covers the entire cost of the college. The tuition, the room and board, which are the big components, but it also covers the personal expenses, like basically putting together the dorm room, as well as pens, notebooks, so on and so forth, supplies, a laptop. There's also transportation costs covered in or considered in the cost of attendance, as well as insurance fees, new student fees, technology fees, parking fees, lab fees. All these different fees go into cost of attendance. Now, for you guys out there watching tonight, cost of attendance is important for two reasons. And this is why I told you guys, write down cost of attendance is one of the terms to be using going forward. First reason you want to be using the cost of attendance as a term is because by law, the universities must provide you with their cost of attendance, i.e. their total cost for one academic year. Reason that's important because you want to know what the whole billing amount is, obviously. The second reason you want to use the cost of attendance term is if you're negotiating. Because if you're negotiating, if you're appealing, if you're asking for more aid, then you want to make sure that when you're negotiating, you're using the biggest number in cost as far as a factor, not reducing it and just talking about the tuition and room and board costs. You want to bring in all the factors when you're negotiating so you have more space to try to get more aid for you guys going forward. That being said, I do see there's 2 questions that popped up about divorce. There is a slide on divorce, and there is a slide also on multiple students going off to college in the presentation, so I will cover both the questions that just popped up. Now, when it comes to financial aid forms, there's 2 different financial aid forms you guys will be filling out. The form on the left is filled out by everyone. It's called the FAFSA form. At the end of the FAFSA form is a state form requirement. That's the second form you're all going to be filling out. And then there's a third form, the form you see on the right, which is called the CSS Profile, known as a college scholarship search. Some of you will be filling this out, not all of you. Now, the FAFSA form is filled out by everyone. I have a video on YouTube about why you fill it out no matter what. I have families, and by the way, in 23 years of doing this, I've easily met somewhere between 150, maybe 175,000 families doing this thing every year. I do 70 to 80 high school presentations every year, working at the different colleges, easily over 150,000 plus families. In that 23-year time frame, I have told somewhere between 7 to 8, maybe 10 tops families not to do the FAFSA for 1 year for very unique, specific reasons. So no matter what your brother-in-law says, your sister-in-law, your uncle, your aunt, your neighbor, the college advisor guy, or the accountant or the financial planner, no matter what they say to you, fill out the FAFSA no matter what. And this is why, because everyone wants to know why. The video explains why, but I'll explain to you now in a more detail, less detailed than the actual whole video. You fill it out because of this reason. At every college I ever worked with, every college I was ever in the financial aid office, every summer, 1 week before school starts, without fail, we had anywhere from 7, 8, 10 families show up, and it was always the same thing right before school started. Ed, I lost my job. I went from full-time work to part-time work. Ed, they furloughed us. Ed, they let us go. Bankruptcy, medical expenses, death of a spouse. A bunch of different financial reasons popped up that you weren't foreseeing happening. Obviously, pandemic, no one saw this happening. That being said, the moment you walk into the financial aid office and you say to them, I need more help, the first question they're all going to ask you, from the person at the front desk all the way to the director of the campus, did you fill out the FAFSA form? Once you say no, my neighbor, my accountant, the college advisor guy, doesn't matter anymore. They can't help you. You didn't do the form. Now, if you said, yes, I did do the form, I thought I wasted an hour of my life, I didn't get anything, so on and so forth, you didn't waste your life because what you did was you basically signed an insurance policy for yourself, financial aid-wise speaking. Because what happens is you're there sitting with the counselor, they pull up your FAFSA. They start asking you questions. Did you get any unemployment? Was there any severance? How much are the medical bills, et cetera, et cetera. While you're still sitting there, they're figuring out for you how much state aid they're going to get you, how much school aid they're going to get you, and how much federal aid they're going to get you. If you wait until August or July or June to do the financial aid forms, because then something happened, rather than doing the forms earlier, I'm going to give you the deadlines in the next slide, by the way, earlier, you're going to miss deadlines. Because in the world of financial aid, there's not one deadline. There's 3 deadlines. There's a college deadline, a state deadline, and a federal government deadline. And if you get all your financial aid forms in, might as well say now, by February 1st for senior year, you're covered for all 3. If you wait until something goes wrong in June, July, or August, obviously now people unfortunately are still being let go. They didn't think they were going to be let go. Obviously, these people, if they didn't do the forms in their freshman year or their sophomore year, are in big trouble because they've already missed the school deadline and the state deadline. So you basically shot yourself in the foot by eliminating 60 to 70% of possible aid. Do the FAFSA form no matter what. I have people, and everyone always asks, yes, I help families with the financial aid forms. So if you need help with the financial aid forms, I do help families. I have families that do the financial aid form with me. They have no income. They're in bankruptcy, foreclosure, they have Social Security income, they're on disability. I have them fill out the FAFSA, all the way up to families that I know have net worths of $10, $15, $20 million. They even do the FAFSA form. So anyone in between watching, you do the FAFSA form. That being said, here is where you fill out the FAFSA form online. You fill it out on FAFSA.ed.gov. This is the actual website you guys go to fill out the form. The form becomes available starting October 1st. So basically in like 2 or 3 days, this form becomes available. If you're a senior parent and you're already done the FAFSA form, or you're starting the FAFSA form, you're doing the wrong FAFSA form. Here at Principia Prep, we have a Facebook page. On our Facebook page, we post a lot of different things of what you should be doing, not doing, scams, new programs on our Facebook page. So if you follow us on Facebook, just look us up, Principia Prep. I'll explain the stuff at the end. But one of the things that's driving me nuts is in the last week, I've seen a bunch of these, the college advisor people saying, I'm ready to submit your FAFSA form. Let me know before October 1st, ready to go. And then underneath that comment, I see like 10 different families who've already filled out the FAFSA form before. I'll say to the person, October 1st is the start date, not the finish date. This is what is insane to me, that these people are college advisors, but that's another topic altogether. That being said, the FAFSA form for senior parents, you do not start this. This is what drives me nuts. You do not start the FAFSA before October 1st. October 1st is when the form becomes available. If you start the FAFSA before October 1st, you're doing the wrong form. And in some cases, it screws up the entire system. Because once again, you guys have 4 years of financial aid eligibility. Remember that, 4 years of aid. So if you fill out the FAFSA today, you're indicating to the schools, your students in college right now. So you're basically eliminating 1 year of aid. It doesn't happen that way anymore, but it has in the past. So if you do the wrong form, you could be shooting yourself in the foot again by trying to jump ahead of the line or doing the form too early. Do not do the form before October 1st. Your goal is to get the form done between October 1st and February 1st for senior parents only. Juniors and below, you don't do anything once again. For senior families, October 1st to February 1st. The only time you have to do the form earlier than that time frame is if you're doing early decision 1. Early decision 1 indicates that you must send in everything, admissions paperwork, financial aid paperwork, all paperwork, by the early decision 1 deadline. That's the way this whole thing works. Now, your goal, everyone always asks this, should we get it in on October 1st, October 2nd? There's no such thing as first come, first serve. It's another thing that many families don't understand because everyone pushes this, I guess you can call it propaganda nonsense. There's no such thing as first come, first serve. There's never been anything associated with first come, first serve, where if you're the first 1,000, the first 100, the first week getting the form in, there's no more money. It's not the way it works. Do not in any way or form do the FAFSA form before October 1st or really before October 2nd. October 1st, the FAFSA site crashes every day on October 1st because everyone jumps on there thinking first come, first serve, they're going to run out of money. They're not going to run out of money, okay? If you fill out the FAFSA form October 1st, November 1st, December 1st, or even January 1st, you get the same exact money. You don't have to jump onto the first day. If you jump onto the first day, I guarantee you it will take you 2 to 3 hours to fill out this form. If you look at our Facebook page, which has been up for like 10 years now, October 1st, every year, I put a screenshot where it says the site is down because it goes down every year because everyone jumps on at the same time. Do not go on the form October 1st. Wait at least a day or two, then go on there. Now, I have about 7 questions just popped up. Let me just go to the next slide, and I'll start touching on the questions here. 1 second here. We talked about this one already. We do have a slide, once again, on the divorce, so we will be talking about the divorce stuff. Good question. When you're filling out the FAFSA form is student-specific. Now, what I mean by student-specific is this. If you have 2 students going off to college, that basically means you're filling out 2 FAFSA forms. The FAFSA will be for each student, okay? Once again, you guys, another question. Whether your student is an athlete dealing with the clearinghouse and everything else, you cannot submit the FAFSA form before October 1st. It does not exist for you guys. So for senior parents, you must wait till after October 1st to fill out the FAFSA form. Whether your student is a legacy, an athlete, the valedictorian, it does not matter. October 1st is the start date. I will touch on multiple students in college, so we'll touch on that subject here. I'm just going through your different questions, guys. There's like 2 more, and I'm going to get back to this slide here. The FAFSA logins are on this slide here, so I'll be talking about the FAFSA logins right here, guys. Just give me 1 second. And yes, another question popped up. You will fill out the FAFSA form every year, anticipation of academic or financial aid assistance every year going forward. So you fill out this year's FAFSA after October 1st for seniors. For next academic year, and you do it again after October 1st of that academic year for more aid going forward as well. Now, when you're filling out the FAFSA form, I had a question pop up about multiple students filling out the FAFSA. If you already have one student who's done the FAFSA last year, start with their FAFSA first. Because for the second student, what will happen is at the end of the confirmation screen for the first student, you're going to get basically a link. It's going to say, we notice you have a sibling going to college. Do you want to pre-populate a second FAFSA? Say yes. So if you want to, if you're filling out two FAFSAs and one student's already in school, start with that student first, then move on to the second one, because the confirmation page, once you click on the pre-populate the second FAFSA, all mom and dad's information is moved over, okay? That being said, let's talk about the slide here. When it comes to FAFSA, you must get two FAFSA IDs to be able to sign the form, submit the form, and do some other things. The two FAFSA IDs are one for the student and one for the parent. On the screen here, you see, I actually created a step-by-step guide on the YouTube channel of how to obtain your FSA IDs. You need both of them because each one of them does something that's necessary to be able to submit the FAFSA. You get the first ID, the student's ID, right here at this website here, we see below, FSA.ed.gov. This website here, you can create your FSA IDs right now. So you don't have to wait till October 1st for senior parents. Juniors and below, don't do this yet, but senior parents, you can do this now. You get the first ID, the student's ID, to log into the FAFSA, to start the form. You get the second ID, the parent's ID, to be able to do this. It's called the IRS retrieval. Halfway through the FAFSA form, it's going to allow you, as you look at the bottom of the screen here on the slide, link to IRS. It allows you to link your parents' IRS tax returns. For senior parents this year, you'll be using your 2019 taxes for all financial aid forms. For junior parents, your 2020 taxes will be utilized when you get to senior year. And then for sophomore parents, the 2021 tax year, that's the tax year you'll be using. So on the FAFSA form, halfway through, you can log in as a parent by putting in your FSA ID, which will allow you to click on Link to IRS, which then uploads your taxes directly to the FAFSA form. Your senior parents, the 2019 taxes, automatically uploads. What that does is it makes your FAFSA in the world of the colleges essentially 99% correct. So it's the best way to do it. That's why you need two IDs. One for the student to start it, one for the parent to upload their taxes, and then both IDs at the end to sign. You can technically start the FAFSA with one ID, the students, manually put in everything, then submit the FAFSA only with that one student's login. However, nothing will happen. They will not calculate your number. They will not send any information to college until mom or dad, one of the two of you, not both of you, just one of the two of you, signs as a second signature. So that's why you need two IDs. One question here just popped up. Let me just see what we have here. There's a question that says the common application has a FAFSA form on there. It doesn't really have a FAFSA form on there. It has a financial aid resources tab, which is the fifth tab on the top of the links there. But the reality is the FAFSA form and Common App are two different entities altogether. So just go to the FAFSA site to fill out the FAFSA form. You can use the Common App's financial aid resources tab. It's kind of like a guideline to kind of figure stuff out as far as learn more research about stuff. But the reality is the Common App is just for the admission stuff. That being said, what goes on the FAFSA form, what counts, what doesn't count? Right at the bat, cash, savings, checking, stocks, and bonds count on the FAFSA. The amounts that count are the ones that are outside of the retirement accounts, because there's two things on the FAFSA that do not count that unfortunately many families do put on there. Number one, your primary residence, where you live, the equity in your home does not go on the FAFSA form. Number two, your 401ks, your 403bs, any retirement accounts you have do not go on the FAFSA form. So 401ks, IRAs, Roths, annuities, for the pensions, these things do not go on the FAFSA, the amount you have. Also, your primary home, the equity in your home, does not go on the FAFSA. Investments outside of those two things, as far as second property, the equity in second property, goes in the FAFSA form. Stocks, bonds, mutual funds outside of your retirement accounts go on the FAFSA form. For college savings accounts, it used to be divided depending on the category you're in. So if you're in a 529 or a UTMA or UGMA, uniform trust, uniform gift, they go in different sections of the financial aid forms. That's been changed, and I put them all together. Any college savings you have go in the parent section of the financial aid forms. You'll understand what that means in a moment. Now, if the college savings account that you have is set up by anyone other than the parent, so if the parent's the principal and the student's a beneficiary, then it goes on the financial aid forms. If the grandparent is the principal and the student's a beneficiary, it does not go on the financial aid forms because the grandparent owns it, not the student. That's the way it works with the college savings stuff. I see a couple questions just popped up. Let me just go to the next slide here, guys, which is going to be the expected family contribution. As you guys look at this slide here, I'm going to answer a couple of your questions here quickly so we can just kind of keep everything going. Yes, good question. On the FAFSA form, you can only put 10 schools on at once. So what you do is you put those 10 schools on first, then you wait basically 2 weeks. You come back after you submitted that. You can change schools out and then resubmit the form if you have more than 10 colleges for the FAFSA to be able to send to multiple colleges. That being said, good question. If your financial situation has changed from 2019 taxes to 2020, I will address this when I get to the appeal slide. And there is specific things you need to know about the appeals and how it works. So for those whose income has changed, either because of job loss or because of business dropping because of COVID, I will address that in the appeal slide. If you are taking, one of the questions is, if we're taking withdrawals from 401k or 403bs or any retirement accounts, will that count towards counting against us for financial aid? And the answer is yes. Reason being is that when you take money out of retirement, it counts as income. So it will show up on your taxes. They will see it. So essentially it will affect your financial aid eligibility. You can, it's a good question. If your child is in college right now and you want to do the FAFSA for this academic year, you can do the FAFSA right now. So you are extremely late, but there might be the opportunity for some financial aid assistance. Sure, somebody had just missed the slide for the FSA IDs. For the person who missed the slides for the FSA IDs, it's fsaid.ed.gov. So fsaid.ed.gov is where you go. If you go to the FAFSA and you try to log on to the FAFSA, it's also going to tell you to go to the FSA ID, so they have the link as well. When you're filling out the FAFSA form, you guys are filling out one form. It's the student's form. There's not a parent FAFSA, by the way. It's just the student form you're filling out. So as parents, you're filling out the form on their behalf. So you're filling out their FAFSA form for the student on their behalf. You're filling everything in because on the FAFSA, it will show you guys not just their section of financial questions, but also the parent section too. So each FAFSA is student specific. Okay, guys? You guys can keep asking away questions. I'm going to answer like 2 more. I'm going to get back to the presentation, or else we're going to be here for like 4 hours, unfortunately. And a lot of your questions I do cover. I'm going to answer this last question because basically the next 2 questions are exactly the same about the 529s. When it comes to 529s, the way it works is this. With 529 plans, what you guys have to realize, let's just say you have 3 students, okay? I'm just going to give you an example. You have 3 kids, okay? And each one of them has a 529. So student 1, student 2, student 3. So all 3 of them have 529 money. And each one, let's just say each one has $15,000, just to make the math easy. So you have $45,000 in college savings in total, 15 for each student. But only one of them is going off to college. So you're filling out the financial aid forms and you're wondering, since I'm only filling out this form for this one student, do I only count $15,000 of the college savings? The answer is technically no. You're supposed to count all 3 people's college savings accounts because of the fact that you as a parent are the principal, so you have access to all of it. That being said, even though we're being recorded and everything else and everybody's watching, I think we have 100-some people on here. Let's just say you weren't paying attention. Let's just say your mic just went out or you just hit the mute button by accident and you didn't hear that. Maybe by accident, you just put down your one student's 529 money by accident, okay? That's as far as I can go. If you've seen me in my presentation mode in front of you in live audience, I get more candid, but in this setting, I can't really get much more candid than that. If you want more insight, once again, I'll give you my contact information at the end. I can explain in further detail what I mean. That being said, here are the 4 components to make up the expected family contribution. What you see in front of you now is what's known as the basic expected family contribution formula used or figured out to basically fit most families. This is how they figure out how much you need to pay for college for one student going off to college for one academic year. I'm gonna start from the bottom and work my way up. If you want to, you can basically, I'm gonna give you guys essentially a copy of this if you guys want. So You can also, you don't have to figure out your number here. I want to give you a website at the end of this slide where you can go to kind of figure out your number. It's a lot easier if you go to the website. I just go through the numbers so you guys know how the equations work. Right at the bat, student assets. Any money in the student's name, they want 20% of it to go towards the cost of college. So if your student has $1,000 in a checking account, 200 bucks of that is the first of the 4 parts they add to come up with what you should be paying towards college. Part 2, student's income. Students are allowed to make up to $6,500 before $1 counts. So for senior families, if your students did work, and in 2019 their taxes, they made under $6,500, none of that money counts towards the college expense. If they made over $6,500, every dollar they made over 50 cents on the dollar must be added or will be added into the equation as part 2. Part 3, parents' assets. As parents, you're given what's known as an asset protection allowance. Now, it's a little tricky for me to kind of explain how it works, but just write this down. It's the easiest thing, kind of way for me to explain. Write down that you have an asset protection allowance of roughly $25,000. Let me explain what that means. So, remember, the retirement accounts, the primary home where you live do not go on the FAFSA, the amounts you have. That being said, let's say all the money you have in the world is $20,000 in checking, savings, investments, whatever it may be. You put on the FAFSA form that you have $20,000 in investments. The FAFSA form does not count your $20,000 at all because you're under the $25,000 of asset protection. Let's say you have $100,000 in assets. Put that on the FAFSA. The FAFSA will then back out $25,000. The $75,000 remaining, the FAFSA will assess at a rate of 5.6%, which means you start thinking about it, the student's money counts at 20%. The parent's money counts at 5.6%, things you might want to do before you fill out the financial aid forms. And by the way, all the financial aid forms, all of them, when they ask for information about your finances as far as stocks, bonds, mutual funds, cash, savings, checking, etc., we'll all ask the same question. How much do you have in checking and savings as of today, the day you're filling out the form? How much do you have in investments as of today, the day you're filling out the form? So if things change, things are adjusted, so on and so forth, you can kind of play around with the numbers in a sense if you have to move stuff around. Now, the 4th component is the parent income. Now, the way it works is the more you make, the more they expect you to pay towards the college cost. So some of you are wondering, do they want us to pay 20% of our income, 47% of our income? How does it work? Well, right off the bat, when they're asking you for your income, they're asking for adjusted gross income. Essentially the amount that on your tax returns that basically sums up all your different income sources. Now, of the adjusted gross income, let me give you an example of how it works. If your adjusted gross income is between $50,000 to $200,000, that range, they're expecting you guys to pay 20% of that income towards college. So if you're making $100,000 adjusted gross, you're paying 20 grand towards college. That's the way it works. Once you reach the 200 level and you start going up as far as more income, that's when the percentages start going up, 30, 35, 40, etc. You take these 4 parts together, and that's how they come up with your expected family contribution, what they think you can pay at least for one student's education for 1 year. Now, the easiest way to do this is not to write this all down because you're going to drive yourself nuts. I just do this to explain how it works. The easiest thing to do is go on to College Board. On College Board, they have an EFC calculator. The EFC calculator lets you play around the numbers, which is important for 2 reasons. Number 1, if you plug in your numbers for 2019 and you know your numbers for 2020 will be lower, you can figure out how much of a change is going to be for your expected family contribution because you've already figured out by going on the calculators. Second reason it's important to do the EFC calculator is to figure out where you are from a broad perspective of what every college expects you to pay at least. So the expected family contribution is a very important number for you to know, also to understand. That being said, what happens at the end of the FAFSA? Well, very simple. This screen pops up, or this is basically half the screen that pops up, but we minimized it to show you something very important here. Now, there's 2 blue boxes in the middle. The blue box on the right, I already talked about, where if you have 2 students going off to college, you can pre-populate second student's FAFSA by clicking on the second blue box where it says, does your brother or sister need to complete a FAFSA? The box on the left is the state form. The state of New Jersey, as pretty much every state in the United States, require, if you're looking to stay in the state of New Jersey, Princeton and everything below, you must fill out the FAFSA and the state form, the HESAA form here, the link at the end of the FAFSA, which is typically 1 to 6 questions to be eligible for additional state aid consideration. So at the end of the FAFSA, you must fill out this form here to get the state aid requirement to be able to be considered for state aid. So filling out these two forms makes you federal aid consideration as well as state aid consideration. Now, other than filling out these two forms, the question once again that everyone's always asked me is, and I've seen the question like 3 times already pop up in the Q&A is, but Ed, I was told I made too much. Or Ed, what if I make too much? Once again, your income is irrelevant until you do the forms, and also you do them at least the FAFSA as an insurance policy. What you see on the screen right now is a notice that was being sent out by the state of New Jersey. It's still being sent out by the state of New Jersey. As of August 15th or so, the state of New Jersey has been sending out this COVID notice indicating to parents and students in college right now that the state of New Jersey is going to guarantee your fall financial aid, but they cannot guarantee your spring financial aid. So why is that so important for the seniors and juniors here now, specifically the seniors? Very simple. If you miss a deadline for financial aid, I guarantee you, no matter how bad your situation is financially, the state of New Jersey will not fund you. They just will not fund you. You could lose your whole business, your house, your spouse, everything, and they will not provide you aid if you need help if you miss the deadline. I have never in 23 years of doing this, I mean never in 23 years of doing this, ever seen the state of New Jersey send out a notice telling parents, we can fund you for 1 semester, but we're not sure about funding you for the 2nd semester. The fact that they sent this out now, for me, as a college advisor person, I guess you can call us, this what scares me, the fact that when parents say, I'm not going to fill it out because I can't get anything. Fill it out no matter what, because if something goes wrong, and I guarantee you, there's parents out there that in January and February thought they were fine economically, and they're in a lot of trouble right now. They didn't fill out the form and then missed the deadline, and now this comes out. Fill out the FAFSA no matter what anyone tells you. If you want to run it by me, your situation, just call me, but I'm probably going to tell you, fill it out no matter what. That being said, let's talk about College Board, which is technically the second form because the state form and the FAFSA are connected in a sense. Now, there's a reason why when I'm talking about the CSS profile form, I put up the home page of College Board, which you're going to understand in a moment, rather than showing you the direct link to the CSS profile. Now, on College Board is where you fill out the CSS profile. When you're filling out the CSS profile, you log in using the student's SAT account information. So you only need one login for the CSS profile, which is done here on College Board. Once you get on the College Board website, everyone see right above the young lady there that says Big Future with a little blue balloon there. Right next to that, you go 4 links over where it says Pay for College. Right in between Explore Careers and Get In. Right there, Pay for College. You click on that. That link there would, number 1, show you a list of every school that needs a CSS profile form. So you'll find out right then and there, do I need to fill it out? Or you can, number 2, call the school's financial aid office and they'll tell you over the phone whether or not you need to fill out the form, yes or no. Number 2, the second reason I'm showing you the whole page here of College Board is because right above where it says Pay for College, where you click on to start the CSS profile, right above it, you have a search bar. In that search bar, it allows you to pull up any college's profile, which shows you everything. Their admission stuff, their financial aid stuff, etc. That's very important that you know that bar's there. That's why I put up this slide here, because it's one of the 2 ways to find out if your school is generous or not. That's why I'm showing this right now. That being said, the CSS profile, like all the rest of the financial aid forms, become available starting October 1st of senior year. Now, there's a humongous difference between FAFSA and CSS. And if the school requires you to fill out the CSS, you also have to fill out the FAFSA. One does not substitute the other. They basically are one in hand. If you have to fill out one, you have to fill out the other. Specifically CSS, you still have to fill out the FAFSA form situation. Now, when it comes to CSS, it's a lot more in-depth than the FAFSA. Right off the bat, it does count your primary home value. It also counts your retirement value. So it goes more in-depth and wants to know everything. CSS will even ask you, what's the value of your car in some cases? Do you have expensive hobbies, coin collecting, comic books, this kind of stuff? It goes very in-depth. Now, when it comes to the CSS profile, in the state of New Jersey, only one school requires the FAFSA, the CSS, the state form, and their own institutional forms. It's Stevens Institute of Technology. It's the only school. No other school requires a CSS in the state of New Jersey but Stevens. Now, of the CSS profile, The differences between FAFSA and CSS are tremendous, as I mentioned before. FAFSA, 95, 100 questions, not too bad. CSS, standard, 400 questions to start. And it can go up from there depending on the college that you select to go on the form, because each school you add to the form will ask you anywhere from no questions to 10, 15, 20 additional questions at the end. They can select how many questions they want you to answer. Another big difference between FAFSA. FAFSA is free, no charge to fill it out. CSS costs $25 for each school to fill out the form. FAFSA just wants to know 2019 numbers. CSS, 2019, 2020 projected year end, and projected 2021 tax numbers, which hasn't even started yet. If you get overwhelmed with either form, if you don't know how to answer a question, do not rush. Both forms have save buttons. Hit the save button. Do not rush through this, because the FAFSA, you mess it up, it's fine. You go back in there, you can make changes, submit it again. The CSS profile, the second form, you make an error and you submit it, you cannot change it. It's locked. You must call each school individually and find out how to fix it, which is a huge nightmare. In some cases, they want you to print the whole thing out, X numbers off, write numbers in, fax it in. It's just an unfortunate nightmare in a sense to fix it. So if you get overwhelmed, hit the save button. Do not rush with these two forms, specifically the CSS. I see a lot of questions popped up. Let me just double check. I think I've answered a couple of these guys. For custodial accounts, good question. For custodial accounts, as far as the parent and the student account, custodial accounts, there's a post account in the student section of the financial aid forms. Now, if you want to put them in your section, that's not a big deal. So it's perfectly fine. But the reality is, if your student has, let's say, $2,000 or $3,000 in a custodial account or a savings account, you don't really have to count it, especially if the student is using that money to buy a car, let's say, and you know that money's going to be gone in a month or two. Just don't count it if it's a small amount. Now, your student can't have 40 or 50 or 60,000 in the custodial account and you don't count it. There's kind of an honor system here. So, you know, they can't buy a Corvette, okay? They can buy, like, you know, a 95 Buick. That's kind of the way of, you know, the honor system scenario. That being said, the stimulus money is a good question. I have seen this. The question is, how should we handle the stimulus money as far as unemployment? And I have seen students, college students, and even some high school students get the unemployment money, even the $600 extra, which is pretty nice for, you know, an unemployed high school student to be getting like $800, $900 every month, every week for doing absolutely nothing, which is, you know, it is what it is, no matter which way you look at it. But that being said, whatever money they got from the stimulus package, as far as unemployment, that will count as income. So unemployment does count as income on your taxes. So more than likely for their 2020 taxes, not this academic year, sorry, not this financial aid period when you're filling out forms this year for next academic year, but 2 academic years from now when they use the 2020 taxes, yes, it will affect you, any money you guys took or received from unemployment. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. A couple of you guys letting me know I'm doing a good job. I do speak very quickly, as you can tell. I do it mostly because I have most of my presentations are so packed with stuff. I want to get all to you guys quickly, so I don't want to keep you guys forever. That's why I go very fast. The person asking about the private school, you can't really show you're paying private school tuition on the FAFSA. You can only show it on the CSS profile. If you want more in-depth of how it counts or doesn't count, send me an email, because I need to know what schools your student's applying to, because some schools will count private school tuition, some schools will not, as far as high school or below. Answered that question. Give me one second. I have one more question, guys, and we'll get back to the slides here. Good question. Who determines if you do the CSS profile or not? It's the school. So the school determines whether or not they want the CSS profile, and every year the list of schools who want it changes. To give you an example, Quinnipiac 4 years ago wanted it every year. Then 2 years ago, they only wanted it for the freshman year. And now last year going forward, they don't want it anymore. NYU's wanted it like every 3 years they want it, then they don't want it. So every year they change, unfortunately. I will have a slide, by the way, about the loans. So the question just popped about the loans. I have a slide just for you guys in a few minutes here. That being said, here is the first of the 2 ways you find out if your school is generous and will be generous to you, i.e. your family. Right off the bat, every family should be doing what's known as the net price calculator. You should all write that down. You can basically, it's very simple. You can just go to Google, because we all go to Google now. At least most of us do. You go to Google, you type in any school's name and the term net price calculator. So James Madison, net price calculator. Ramapo, net price calculator. Fairleigh Dickinson, so on and so forth. Harvard, etc. And what happens is you get a specific calculator for that university. So The benefit of the net price calculator is it's school specific, where if you do the expected family calculator, it gives you a broad number, what every school thinks you can pay towards college. When it comes to the net price calculator, and the reason I'm showing College Boards, because most of them are on the College Board site, by the way. So if you Google it, they're probably going to send you the College Board anyways. That is a school-specific equation. So whatever numbers you put into the net price calculator, it's going to show you how much that school is going to, number one, expect you to pay out of pocket for that school specifically, as well as how much money that school can give you in grants and scholarships. If you're looking to do early decision, this is your safety blanket. And this is what I mean. Your school says to you, you do the net price calculator. Let's just say the school costs $80,000. It's just a number. You do the net price calculator, and the net price calculator says, we're going to give you $50,000 in grants and scholarships. You print out that PDF because you know school costs 80, they're going to give us 50. We're only on the hook for 30. You print that out because if your student's accepted, and if you put the proper numbers on the form, like numbers that are in the range of what you actually have as far as income, assets, etc., and your student gets accepted, and the school comes back and says, we're going to give you $10,000 of help. You go back to the school and say, thank you, we want a deposit, but there seems to be an error here. Your net price calculator that your school put together as far as the equation to calculate our information based on your equation says we should be getting $50,000. Here's your PDF. That's kind of the way you cover yourself if you're looking at early decision and you're a little bit afraid of the financial component. That being said, I actually did a net price calculator just to make it easy for everyone to see how it works. I did Harvard because everyone understands Harvard. Now, your student doesn't have to be going to Harvard. I'll explain that in a moment. I'm just using Harvard because everyone knows Harvard. So Harvard shows us their cost of attendance is $76,791. So they show us the total cost, which is good. I put into the Harvard equation a family of 4 with 1 going to college, parents making $100,000 combined with $50,000 in investments. It said that Harvard's going to give us $64,841 in grant money based on this scenario. I know it says scholarships, but there's no such thing as scholarships at Harvard because everyone's brilliant going to Harvard, so they don't give out scholarships. It's technically grant money because it's need-based. That being said, they're indicating here that we can afford to pay just under $12,000. $11,950 is what we're paying to send one student to Harvard. Now you're probably wondering, Ed, that's great. Harvard's giving a bunch of money out to rich kids or brilliant kids, whatever you want to call them, but we're not going to Harvard. I wish we were going to Harvard type scenario. That being said, Harvard is just an example here. It doesn't matter which school I use because schools that follow this same format as far as giving out a ton of money, Johns Hopkins, Franklin and Marshall, Muhlenberg, Ithaca, Providence, UVA, Tulane, Pomona, Occidental. I could go on for half an hour telling you how many schools follow the same format of being 80 to 100% need-based, generous, extremely generous colleges. Fairleigh Dickinson, Rider, Centenary, tons of schools. Fairfield, Quinnipiac. I can go on forever. So it's not the level of school that dictates how generous they are. It's typically the board of directors and how much endowment money they have. So if you want to find out, is my school generous? First of the 2 ways, Google the school's name and the term net price calculator. That being said, here's one of the slides that I talked about before, the divorce slide. And the next slide, by the way, is the multiple students in college. Let me just touch on one quick question. Good question. If you're eligible for VA benefits, whether it be the yellow ribbon or any of the other stuff you have available to you, or the GI stuff or the 9/11 stuff, I actually just did all the applications for the 9/11 stuff for one of the parents about a week ago. So the way it all works as far as that stuff is concerned is yes, you still fill out the FAFSA form, even for VA benefits, 9/11 benefits, all that stuff, you still do the FAFSA. It's still the starting point for everything. That being said, let's talk about divorce when it comes to the FAFSA. When it comes to the FAFSA form, as far as marital status, by question 25 or 30 or so, it's going to ask you guys, what's the parent's marital status? There's 6 answers to this, believe it or not. Answer number 1, married, remarried, same answer. Answer number 2, divorced or separated, same answer. Answer number 3, not married. Answer number 4, not married, living together. Answer number 5, widowed. And then answer number 6, unable to provide financial information. If you indicate on the FAFSA that your students or the parents of the student are divorced or separated, remember, same answer. Another question will pop up. That other question is going to ask you, who does the student live with 51% of the time or more? If you indicate that the student lives with mom 51% of the time or more, all of dad's information is erased. If you indicate they live with dad 51% of the time or more, all mom's information is erased. And what I mean by information is all the questions about the finances of that parent are erased. So the other parent's income and assets will not be asked of them. It will not be part of the equation. Now, if you're separated in the world of financial aid, the term separation technically means you're not living together for 3 months or longer. And if that's the case on the FAFSA, it automatically erases your students, it automatically erases the other parent's financial situation immediately. So it makes you more eligible for aid. That being said, the unfortunate situation is if you're remarried. If you're remarried, stepmom, stepdad, their information gets added to the form, is the way it works. Whether you're married a day, a year, 10 years, whether you've adopted the student, changed their name, or you haven't, irrelevant. The step-parent's information goes on the FAFSA form. That's FAFSA. Let's talk CSS. On the CSS profile form, it's school dependent, unfortunately. So what that basically means is, good, bad, or indifferent, when it comes to the CSS, some schools will say to you, we understand you're divorced, but we want both your information. If you want to find out which schools do and do not require both, contact the school's financial aid office. They'll let you know. Because if the school wants both parents' information, if you're divorced or separated, that basically means you're both filling out 400 questions each. You're each doing your own CSS. Making matters worse, if you're both remarried, it's all 4 parents' finances go on the form. Unfortunately, good, bad, or indifferent. That being said, let's talk about multiple students in school. Believe it or not, this is actually one of the most beneficial things that could be happening to you to have multiple students in college at the same time. The way it works is this, and by the way, they don't need to go to the same college. Student 1 goes off to the university, and the university costs $35,000, just to make the math easy, okay? So let's say you fill out all the financial aid forms, and the financial aid forms say you can pay $20,000. That one student going to college has $15,000 of space to be able to be provided financial aid assistance. Let's say year 2, or maybe the same year, the second student goes into college. You have 2 kids in college now. And once again, don't need to go to the same college. I'm just indicating each school costs $35,000 to make the math easy. So you're looking at $70,000 in cost. You fill out all the forms again, and the forms say you can pay $20,000 towards the cost of college. Subtract that out, and now you're looking at $50,000 of cost. Difference here is you're still paying $20,000 in total. However, it gets split between the 2 of them. So student 1 that had $15,000 of space is now looking at $25,000 of space because you're still looking to be able to pay $20,000 between the 2 of them, which means $10,000 apiece. So multiple students in school provides more space for financial aid consideration. It's the best case scenario for financial aid in general, broad speaking terms. I've seen families with incomes of $400,000, $500,000 of adjusted gross income receive tens of thousands of dollars in grant money, free money in financial aid because of the fact that they had multiple students in school at the same time. Overlapping students helps out tremendously when it comes to the financial aid process, believe it or not. That being said, I'm going to go over the frequently made errors. Yes, the question just popped about twins. Yes, for twins, this is a very good situation. Quick example, you have $300,000 of adjusted gross income, which means for every $100,000, let's assume they want you to pay $20,000. So you're looking at paying $60,000 for one student. But if you have 2 students in school with a $300,000 income, 2 students in school, that's $30,000 apiece. If you're looking at a Northeastern, NYU, Columbia scenario, that basically means you're looking to pay $30,000 minimum. That means that school can provide you with $40,000 to $50,000 of aid. That's the way of looking at it. So it's a tremendous benefit to have multiple students in school. Now, about 7 questions that popped up. I'm going to just go over the frequently made error slide. Then I'm going to go over your questions, guys, and jump right back on. The frequently made errors, the top 4 every year are first name, last name, social, and birthday. If you can avoid those 4 errors on the admissions paperwork and the financial aid paperwork, you're well ahead of the curve because these are the 4 that delay everything. So for first name, no nicknames. For last name, you have to know your last name. Now, this sounds ridiculous, but if you're remarried, did you change your name on your social security card if you were remarried? If you're remarried, did your son or daughter that you got brought into the marriage, did they change their last name? That's what I mean by last name. Double check the last name. Social security number. Make sure on the admissions paperwork you put the student's social. For some reason, some of the admissions paperwork says you don't need the social, it's optional. If you're applying for aid, it's not optional. put your social on the application for admissions. It links up admissions with financial aid forms. That's why you put the social on the admissions paperwork. And the fourth error, the birthday. If you do not know your student's birthday, they don't know your birthday. If you don't know your spouse's birthday, just let them be annoyed with you for a day or two. But it has to be the right birthday. Do not guess on these. These are the big errors that happen all the time. Let me just check a couple of your questions here. Okay. For the 9/11 stuff, I know it's an unfortunate situation, unfortunate topic. I did have a friend, I did lose in 9/11 as well, a family friend. So I do know it's a sensitive topic, but I do have to bring up there is assistance for parents that were affected in this category, unfortunately. The parent I did help out was a firefighter, so he was able to get a decent amount of help from Fordham based on the situation. So there is a lot of assistance across the board. If you need it, you can find it. Believe it or not, it is still out there. That being said, let me just talk about the loan question. I will get you guys in a minute. I just talked about the twin question. If you have a student in grad school, do they count? How do I answer this on video? No, they do not count. If you want more insight though, give me an email, shoot me a call. I'll explain to you what I mean by, we're on video. I can't really, I'm being recorded. I can't really go in full detail. Plus, I don't know the school list you guys are talking about. So for that question, if you want to email me, I can give you more content on that answer. We talked about the VA stuff. Okay. Early action is not the same as early decision. So the person who was asking about early action means you apply early, just like you do an early decision. Only early decision, you're locked in, you have to go, you're signing a contract saying you will go if accepted. Early action means you're accepted, but you're not binding, or not binded, I guess is the way to put it, to go to the college if you're accepted. Unfortunately, I cannot answer the question about are these sites helpful for single parents. It's not so much if you're a single parent or married or whatever you want to call it, your situation, it's your income is the number one factor. So your marital status in some cases does not affect it as much as your income does. So your income is the number one factor when it comes for financial aid consideration. The errors made for real estate, good question. If you have a real estate property, specifically a timeshare, do not count the timeshare. This is one of the errors I see all the time. Main reason being is that most people that own a timeshare own it with like 50 other people. So just don't count a timeshare. It's the big error I see typically on the real estate. For the person asking about disability insurance, send me an email because it depends on how the disability is being taxed. So I need to ask you a couple questions to let you know if it counts or doesn't count on the FAFSA. There are certain things on the FAFSA that don't count as far as income, like Social Security benefits does not count disability specifically. So this is what I mean by send me your questions. So I need to ask you kind of where it's located on your taxes. That being said, let's get back to the presentation. I think we have about like 6 slides left, guys, and we'll be done. Yes, by real estate, I understand you mean rental property. Rental property of all kinds do count. So if you have a 2-family house and you live in one side and rent out the other half, then you must count half the equity in your primary home. That's the way it works, if that's your question. Okay. Let's talk social media landmines. And what do I mean by landmines? Well, I mean landmines for both admissions and financial aid. As you can see here, tonight's presentation, I go over both, okay? When it comes to the admissions side, let me talk about that first. I have a lot of colleagues, a lot of friends, a lot of associates, whatever you want to call it, in the world of admissions, and I guarantee you they're all going on TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, Snapchat, Pinterest, everything your student has, they're going on there. The reason they're going on there is not to like your students' pictures. That's not what we're doing. The reason they're going on your student's social media page is to find a reason to reject your student. I'm going to give you the clear-cut, concise reason why an admissions officer goes on social media. It's to reject students. That's the honest truth. No matter what they say to you, there's no other reason to go on there but to find reasons to reject students. The reason I can say that is because they tell me this, number one. And number two, there's too many students applying to college. So they have to find a way of eliminating students. And the easiest way to do that is that they go on social media and find something they don't like. Whether you agree with them, they don't agree with you political-wise, or whatever it is, make your social media pages private, specifically the students. Because if they get rejected, it may have been from something they put on Facebook or Instagram or something else that somebody didn't like for whatever reason. So make all your social media pages for your students specifically private. That's admissions. Talk financial aid. Many of you may have already heard, because it was a giant scandal, especially here in New Jersey. We have a lot of students that like to go to Boston. not as popular as it used to be. Everyone's going south now, or more going south than before. Where about anywhere from 12 to 20 students were rejected, or essentially, expelled from Northeastern. So the reason this happened, good, bad, or indifferent, was because supposedly the students were not social distancing. They all were gathered in a group and they got expelled. Now, some families, everyone has opinion whether it was right to expel them or not to expel them, whether it was right for Northeastern to say, no, we're not going to give you back your tuition money, etc. From what I've heard from the inside of people that I know, is the reason they elected to expel the students, good, bad, or indifferent, whether you agree with it or not. I'm not going to give my opinion on it, but you cannot, during a pandemic, you just cannot, during a pandemic, post on social media, throwing in the face of the university after they've told you, do not gather in large groups. You cannot put pictures on social media showing yourself with 30, 40, whatever amount of people you were with on the campus. You just can't do that. When there's 200 people that have died, unfortunately, you cannot push the university by saying, I want to get likes on my Facebook or Instagram. I don't care what your rules are. Here's my post. It was just a terrible, terrible idea. That being said, whether you agree with what happened or don't agree with what happened, financially speaking, of those 20 students who were in that whole expulsion pool, there's at least 10, I guarantee you, where Northeastern was their dream college and they were given a pretty good financial aid package, because I've been dealing with Northeastern for 20 years as far as looking at them, researching, and they're always generous. And I guarantee you those 10 students are never going to go back to Northeastern. So that's a dream just killed right there. But the biggest financial concern or the biggest financial impact on these students is not the tuition, because the lawyers are involved now, good, bad, or indifferent, whichever way you feel about it. They're probably going to get the tuition money back. But the one thing those students will never get back is their fall semester. That time, that fall semester time, is now forever gone. Because I guarantee you, of those students that were expelled in week 3, if not week 4 of the semester, there is no school at Northeastern tier level that's going to accept a student 3 to 4 weeks into the semester. It's just not going to happen. So that semester is now unfortunately gone. So social media, make it private just to cover yourself on all sides. Now let me go over this slide here, and I'll touch on some of the questions you guys have, because a bunch are popping up. Scams. This year has been an explosion of scams. If you follow our Facebook page, once again, I tell you guys, I post on there all the different scams are popping up I'm seeing, so you guys can avoid them. One scam that happened in late March, early April, was a scam from a group sending out emails and also making phone calls, pretending to be Rutgers University, indicating that students had bills and they were going to be thrown out of class, should be thrown out of college if they didn't pay the bills. And of course, this happens all the time too. The email and the phone calls were being made on Friday, like around 3 or 4 o'clock in the afternoon. So you didn't have time to call, you didn't have time to email the college. Saturday, Sunday, you're wondering, should we pay? Because what the emails were saying was, we want your banking routing information, or we want your credit card information immediately, or your student's going to get delisted, thrown out of the college, we're saying. I knew instantly. I knew within the first 2 lines that I read the email, and the email looked very good. It looked exactly like the Rutgers email. But I knew within the first 2 lines, it was a scam. I had about 12 parents send me this, by the way. The reason I knew it was a scam within the first 2 lines was because there is no college. I guarantee you, no college. From county college to Harvard, none of them will ever, ever, ever call you and ask you to pay the bill. They're not going to call you. The colleges are never going to email you saying, give us a credit card number or a checking routing number. They never will. Colleges are all passive aggressive. They just send a list of students to every professor around the middle of October saying, tell the student to leave the class and go to financial aid. And if they don't, they can't come back to the class. So they basically just throw them out of class is the way they do it. Then they deactivate their dorm room key. They deactivate their food keys. They deactivate everything. That's the way the colleges do it. They're not going to call you. They're not going to chase after you for money. So good, bad, or indifferent, we put this on Facebook, but there was a lot of groups doing this nonsense, trying to get parents to pay. Unfortunately, some parents did pay. Obviously, it was a scam. If you want more insight about the scams and things that pop up every year, this website here from the federal government is a great resource. We also did a video on this on the YouTube channel of different scams I see every year and things to avoid. That video is like 20 minutes long. That's why I want to go all in depth this time in our presentation. But if you want to find out more scams and things to avoid, go on the YouTube or go here. Student aid at the bottom, studentaid.gov/resources/scam. Great government resource, provides information about loan scams, scholarship scams. By the way, for scholarships, never pay for scholarship searches. That is always a scam. It talks about grant scams, payment scams. It's very in-depth this year. It's maybe like a 10, 15-minute read, so it's not that in-depth. Our video is like, I think, 10, 12 minutes, so it's also very in-depth, but kind of to the point. So this is a great resource to utilize. Now, let me just go over the quick questions here. I answered the 2 property questions. For the properties, if you have a second property, you're only counting the equity in your second property on the financial aid forms. The question about the CSS profile for your home value. For the CSS profile, it's going to ask you about the year you bought your house, how much you bought it for, how much you owe on the house, how much is your first mortgage, do you have a second mortgage, how much you're paying monthly. Sometimes I even ask you what's your property taxes. So it's very in-depth. So if you want more insight about that, the person asking me about the primary home on the CSS, just send me an email and I can probably connect with you later to kind of answer any additional questions you have. But assume for the CSS, they're very in-depth when it comes to your home. Case Western. I find these questions interesting. A lot of you guys pop up certain colleges. Are they generous? Case Western, yes. Case Western is generous. So if you're looking at Case Western, they are one of the generous colleges out there. So you guys are in good shape there with Case Western. That being said, let's talk about the second way you guys can figure out, or I guess the second way of homework doing yourselves, if your college is generous for you guys. On the screen here, you see the Cornell slide. Now, I've had this slide. I've used Cornell as an example for easily 20 years. And the reason I do it is because Cornell is very generous. Once again, the name of the school is irrelevant. I'll explain to you why in a moment. That being said, Cornell costs $79,443 a year, everything included. So you fill out all the financial aid forms, and they say you can pay 10 grand. So track that out. You're looking at $69,000 of financial aid assistance. Of the $69,000 of financial aid assistance, Cornell meets the entire amount of your financial need. And most of it, basically $64,000 plus, will be in grant aid. So you're probably wondering, well, once again, Ed, Cornell's great, my student's not going there. Once again, Cornell does not matter. I just use them on my slide because I've used them forever on my slide of generosity. The main thing that's important here is the fact that I know that Cornell meets 100% of need, and now so do you. So how do you find out how much need your school meets? The second way to finding out if your school is generous. Very simple. Previous slides, about 7 slides before, I told you there's a reason why I had the College Board profile homepage up. Because once you type in any school's name in the search bar, you click search, that school's profile pops up. On that profile, it has a financial aid section. On the financial aid section for every college are 3 very important numbers. The first number on the left, the first number is how much financial need this college meets, i.e. like Cornell, 100%. In the middle, the second number, it's very important for you to know, is how much of the financial met need is gift aid, the free money. So how much of the money they're giving you is free money. That's why I told you guys before, you have to know what gift aid means. And the third important number is how much does the school meet on average for every incoming freshman. So if you go on the school's profile, you look at the 3 numbers, and you guys use the net price calculators, those are the 2 ways you guys find out if your schools you're considering are generous or not. That's the way to look at it. That being said, let me just get through the rest of these couple slides here, guys. I don't have that many left. So we'll finish off the slides. And then, and once again, back to the slide again, Fairleigh Dickinson, Rider, Ithaca, Haverford, Oberlin, Swarthmore, all these schools fall into this same category. So the name of the school is irrelevant. That being said, after you're accepted to the college, 2 weeks after you're accepted, within that 2-week time frame, you start receiving the financial aid award letters. The financial aid award letters are basically the college's way of saying, we like your student, we've accepted them, we're going to give you scholarships, grants, loans, and work programs in this amount. Once you get your award letter, the sooner you get your award letter, the sooner you can start the negotiation, the appeal, basically the asking for more money situation. Now, when it comes to appeals, let me explain to you guys, there's 2 ways of looking at appeals. There's the admissions appeal for scholarship. Then there's a second appeal, which you're appealing the financial aid office for more grant money. Now, there's no such thing as you always appeal. It's another thing that kind of drives me nuts about people, good, bad, or indifferent, people that unfortunately don't know what they're talking about. I don't want to, say college advisor person, whatever. But something that drives me nuts is when people say you always appeal financial aid. You do not always appeal financial aid. As you see on the slide here, we have a presentation, a video that I made. It's 30 minutes long about how to appeal. I'm not going to keep you guys here 30 minutes on the slide, but I'm going to explain to you guys the two breakdowns of appeals. The scholarship appeal. You always appeal the scholarship with the admissions office for this reason. Three things happen. This is what I mean. School A, where your student really wants to go, has offered you a $10,000 scholarship. School B, maybe the safety school, maybe a target school that gives you a lot of scholarship money, has given you $20,000 in scholarships. Go back to school A and say, thank you for the $10,000, but we want to make you aware that school B here is offering us $20,000. Now, obviously, the college cost is very expensive. We are looking at the cost as one of the factors. Is there any way you can match the number? And that's exactly what you say, by the way, if you want to write down. Is there any way you can match the number? The exact terms you want to use. Three things will happen. Number one, they match the number. We're done. Number two, they come back and say, we couldn't match the number, obviously, couldn't go to 20. We can go up to 15. At which point you say, we appreciate the 15,000, but can we meet in the middle at 17.5? Now, if you started off by saying, can we meet in the middle? You basically just lost 2,500. So you don't never say, can we meet in the middle? You let them come back first. That's number two. Number three, they just say no. You're not going to lose a scholarship, by the way. You can't lose a scholarship by negotiating. If you appeal for grant money, for need-based aid, three things happen. Number one, they give you more aid, more grants. Number two, they don't give you more grants. Number three, they take away your grant money. They can take away a portion of the money they've already offered you. In some cases, they can take away the entire amount. What most people that indicate, and I hear good, bad, or indifferent, people say you always appeal. The reason you don't always appeal is because what most people don't realize that don't do this for a living or haven't been doing this for decades is when you fill out a financial aid form, what actually happens is a financial aid form goes to a giant computer, whether it's College Board's giant computer or it's the federal government's CPR giant computer, and it gets calculated. And that gives you your expected family contribution. And that, by the way, happens in a 1/10 of a second. It happens like that. That number is then sent over to the college. The college takes your expected family contribution number, that number they have from the machine, and then they plug that into another machine. Their giant computer does an algorithm, whatever the school does. Either they do it on campus or they have a consulting company do it. And then that creates your award letter. There's no such thing as a financial aid officer checking off and doing all the calculations for everyone's award letter. It's done by a machine. And if the machine likes or doesn't see any errors or any issues with your FAFSA form, it just sends you the award letter, you're done. If you do an appeal, you are basically bringing in a person. And when you bring in a person looks at things differently than a machine. So if they think you have omitted certain things or forgotten certain things or need to put certain items on your forms that weren't there before, they can take away financial aid. That being said, if your income from 2019 has dropped by at least 20% in 2020, across the board, I'm probably saying, yes, you should appeal for more financial aid if you have at least a 20% drop from 2019 taxes to 2020 taxes. That being said, if you don't have that much, watch the video. There's a reason it's 30 minutes long, explains to you how to do appeals, the in-depthness of it, what goes on there, what doesn't go on there, how to consider it, what they can see, what they can't see. The video goes very in-depth for a reason. I've seen families do appeals for more grant money because they were told by somebody that appeals always work or you should always appeal no matter what, lose $10,000, $20,000, $30,000 in grant money just to try to get an extra 1,000 or 2. You need to make sure you know what you're doing. If you're not comfortable, just watch the video. It's very in-depth, but you can lose grant money if you don't know what you're doing. That being said, let's talk loans. There's 3 different loans out there, by the way. There's federal loans, state loans, and private loans. The minute your student fills out, or you guys fill out the FAFSA form, your student's automatically given a $5,500 federal loan automatically. Nothing else is required. No job history, no credit, no nothing. The $5,500 federal loan they're given is in the student's name. It's paid back 6 months after they graduate. Now, when it comes to that loan, it's paid back over 10, 20, or 30-year repayment program, up to the student, whichever one they want to choose. The second level of loans you're going to be accustomed to hearing about, on the federal side, is called the Parent Plus loan. I like the Parent Plus loan because it lets you take out as much as you need. I also like the Parent Plus loan because they have a lower credit requirement. Somewhere around 620 will let you get the Parent Plus loan to cover the remaining balance of the college for that year. The reason I don't like the Parent Plus loan interest rate starts at 5.3%. Pretty high for this environment. They also have a 4.35% origination fee, which means for every $10,000 you're taking out, they're charging you $430+ fees for every 10 grand. So if you're taking out $50,000 in a loan, you're looking at roughly around $2,200, $2,300 in fees for a 5.3% rate. Second level is the state loans, or what's known here in New Jersey as the NJ class. Here in New Jersey, the NJ class, the rates are around the 4s, so it's not terrible, not great, but not terrible. Unfortunately, they also have an origination fee, so they're charging you fees. The third level, the private loans, are the key at this point in time, because the third level, the private lenders, are starting their rates at 1.25. There's nothing better than starting rates right now with private lenders. They're the best rates because of the environment we find ourselves in, with interest rates being at 0 and the LIBOR and everything else being so low. So for this year and next year, and probably for the next 2 years, the private lenders will probably have the best rates across the board. Now, if you want the list of the top 5 lenders every year, all you need to do is in June, just send me an email. I actually send out probably 150 to 200 parents ask me every year for the list. I rank the top 5 lenders every year just based on interest and terms. I just send it to everybody, whoever wants it. So just take down my email if you want and just email me in June. The reason I do it in June is because of the fact that in June is when the rates come out. Because before June, you don't have the bill, so you don't even know what you're taking out as far as loans. That being said, we do have a newsletter that goes out every month. The newsletter is specifically grade specific. So if you want the newsletter, all you need to do is essentially just email us, Ed, my student's a senior at so-and-so high school. Can I get the newsletter? I send it out. The newsletter is every you can see my son in the background here. That's the next one up in line as far as with the college savings plans. That being said, if you want the newsletter, just email us. We'll send you the newsletter. Scholarships. There's 3 levels of scholarships. There's the college scholarship, the online scholarships, and the local scholarships. Your goal is to, number 1, maximize the college scholarships because they're the easiest ones to get, as well as they're guaranteed for 4 years. The second level of scholarships, the online stuff, can start as early as 6th grade. They actually have scholarships as early as 6th grade for the college process. And you even have scholarships all the way up to PhD level. They're unfortunately the most competition. The 2 websites I like the most are FastWeb and FinAid. These are the 2 largest and oldest in the world. They encompass everything on Scholly, which I like Scholly. CapX, I also like CapX as well, but they incorporate those 2. College Board, NailNet, scholarships.com, Merit Aid. I can go on another dozen scholarship searches, but these 2 are the best. They cover everyone, and they're free. You never pay for a scholarship. The local source, the third source, the high school, is the least competition, and the best thing I would be doing is going to guidance and asking them, when is the scholarship list coming out? Because those are the scholarships that have the least competition. That being said, resources for families out there. FAFSA should be utilized by every senior parent. You should all be filling out the form once again. Even if you know you're not going to get anything, think of it as an insurance policy just in case something goes wrong. College Board, wealth of knowledge for anyone who wants to use it, as well as for seniors for the CSS profile. Once again, scholarship searches, FastWeb, FinAid, do not pay anyone for scholarship searches. It's a ripoff. It always has been a ripoff. If you want to follow us, jump on our YouTube channel. We are posting, as I mentioned before, the guidance offices have been asking me to do this for 6, 7 years. I don't remember anymore. My wife, who you saw walk by with her first child, basically said, you're not doing anything during the day, so why don't you just do the video? So I started doing videos for all the parents asking specific questions. That's why I have over 35 videos on there. I will keep posting as long as everyone keeps subscribing and asking me questions and asking for comments and videos. I will keep posting stuff. Once again, this week I'm posting the early decision, early action, restricted early action, regular rolling financial aid, admissions kind of effect of how you apply. And also on the Facebook page we have, if you want to follow us on Facebook, we have Principia, where we post stuff about admissions, financial aid, scams, things to look out for. We just posted on there. There's virtual college tours this year, and open house is basically a big event happening in October. We just posted that, so you want to follow us on Facebook as well. That being said, here's our contact information. If you have questions, if you have concerns, if you need help with the financial aid forms, once again, I do help out with the forms. On the screen, you see my email address as well as my cell phone number. We have on here, I think we have like 150 people on today, which is crazy. You guys are like the 3rd biggest group. We've already done 2 regional schools, but it's pretty amazing. 143 people, 142 people so far on the meeting here. If you need help, that's my cell phone number. Now, the easiest way to get a hold of me is text message, email, then phone call. Everyone thinks I'm on my mind. My wife thinks I'm on my mind because I'm texting people all day long. Most of the people I don't even know, because everyone knows that the easiest way to get a hold of me if you have a question and need help is to text me. The second best way to get a hold of me is email and then a phone call, because typically I never get to my phone because I'm either talking to somebody already or I'm texting them. So if you need help, just call me. That being said, I know that you guys have a bunch of questions. Once again, the meeting has been recorded. I also have a pre-recording of the meeting too, which does exactly the same thing I did. So I'll be sending you guys that as well to watch again if you need to watch it again. Also, I will be answering questions throughout the rest of the night until I get to the last question here. So if you guys have questions, just ask away. If you want to leave, if you want to get off the call, perfectly fine. I want to thank the guidance office for having me once again. I appreciate you letting me jump on and do the financial aid night again for you guys. I know we've been doing it now for, God, I don't know, probably 7, 8, 9 years now going forward. So other than that, guys, just ask away. I will answer all your questions here. And then after we're done, that's pretty much it. You have my contact information in the corner there. Let me just start answering questions. Okay, good question. If you rent a home, does it benefit you or hurt you? It doesn't actually hurt or benefit you on the FAFSA. Renting does not have any beneficial aspects if you're just FAFSA. If you're CSS profile, you technically have the benefit if you're doing a CSS and you're renting your home. The fact that you don't have a home and don't have equity does provide some benefit as far as the CSS profile goes, not the FAFSA. Is William & Mary generous to out-of-state students? They have kind of gone back and forth on this as far as generosity. I'm assuming based on the pandemic, I would assume for an out-of-state student that William & Mary would try to be generous this year because many colleges are not making their numbers as far as admissions. So that is a negative for them. So it would be surprising if they were not generous this year. Do I recommend early action for athletes? I think, do you mean early decision? Most athletes are asked by the coaches to do early decision. For the person asking about early action for the athlete, just jump back on board. Do you mean early decision? Like, is a coach asking you to lock in through early decision? Because then it's a different question. So if you want to ask me that, I'll get to your question after I get to these people. But I need to know if the athlete's asking about early decision being locked in. Are the appeals done via email or phone? Good question. In the past, when you did an appeal, the best was face-to-face, then second best was email, and third best was over the phone. Now, with everything happening, if you can, through an appeal, I want to go Zoom face-to-face. I guess Zoom would be face-to-face now. Then second, email, and then third, phone call. Email is the kind of hybrid in the middle I like when you're doing an appeal because it lets you sit down, write everything out, think about what you want to say, then send in your question. But face-to-face, it's always difficult for face-to-face for them to say no. That's why I like face-to-face because it's kind of like a negotiation thing where we're there, we need your help. You can even say, look, the school costs, just an example, the school costs $50,000. You guys have given us $10,000. The FAFSA says we can pay $20,000. So we're $30,000 between us, okay? You cost 50. We can pay, you've given us 10. The FAFSA says we can pay 20. So there's 20,000 left over. If you meet us halfway, we'll sign up today. We'll do a deposit. That's the kind of stuff you can do face-to-face. You can't really do that in an email. So I've always liked face-to-face as the number one. So if you do a Zoom, that's the way I would go. Can you appeal scholarship offers in the future? Good question. You cannot, once you receive your scholarship and your student starts college, they will not increase your scholarship money. They can provide you more scholarships in the form of other scholarships. The way to get more scholarships is contact the admissions office of every school your student's considering and ask them, does your school provide scholarships for continuing students? This is typically scholarships for students who have the 3.5 and up, i.e. making the dean's list. Some schools will award you additional scholarships, not add to the scholarship you already have. That being said, should you consider a home equity line? No. I would not consider a home equity line now, specifically based on the fact that the private lenders are so low at the 1.25 that it's going to be probably 1.25 to maybe 2.5 rate on the private lenders for at least another year or two. And in 23 years of doing, even before I started doing this, there was no such thing as a 1.25 private lender for any student loan. So this is probably never going to happen again. We kind of hope it never happens again because that means economically we're fine. That being said, just 1 second here, just making sure my son just stops crying. All right, buddy. Thank you very much for the comments. I appreciate you guys watching. Looks like everything else is, thank you. Super, super great job. Appreciate it, guys. You want to get in here, buddy? I guess you're Zoom famous now. All right. All right, guys. Let's see here. Good question. If you have a parent living with you, i.e. a grandparent that you're caring for or providing 51% of support or more, yes, they count as part of your household, even if they're on your taxes. You do count them on the financial aid forms. What is untaxed income? Untaxed income is typically Social Security benefits of some kind, which are in some cases are not taxed. In some cases, they are taxed. So the financial aid form, specifically the FAFSA, does not count Social Security benefits, specifically if you're dealing with a loss of a spouse. So hopefully that answers your question about the person asking about untaxed assets. Let's see here, we touched that one. How generous are Florida schools? Well, this is the problem with Florida school. No, there's not a problem with Florida schools, but basically in Florida you have Miami, then you have University of Florida. They're kind of like 1A as far as getting into, as far as difficulty, let's put it that way. Then you have Florida State, then you kind of have everybody else. Lynn, Tampa, Southern, Central, Atlantic, everything else. So as far as generosity, it depends on the level of your academics as far as your student. As far as need-based grant money, Florida schools are not very generous. Outside of a school like Lynn, which is private, which is costs a lot. Eckerd is actually pretty generous. Who's else is generous? Southern's generous. Atlantic's generous as well down in Florida. Excuse me, from a need-based perspective, but more than likely in the Florida area, I'm looking at it from a scholarship perspective, because even at Miami's level, at the high level, they do provide scholarship money at Miami. There's a question about, let's see, Kobe, Bates, well, pretty much liberal arts. Pretty much every school with liberal arts is generous. Even the subcategory of liberal arts schools, so Oberlin, Swarthmore, Haverford, Williams, Vassar, they're all generous. And even I guess like a subset, and what I mean by subset, I mean like the Franklin and Marshalls, the Muhlenbergs, even those schools are generous as well too. So yes, most of the liberal arts schools are generous. If the coach is asking you, so it is early action. If the coach is asking you to do early action, it's probably because the school doesn't have early decision. I didn't think about that, but probably because the school doesn't have early decision. It doesn't so much hurt financial aid, but early action, it provides you with the opportunity of getting everything in early so you never miss any financial aid deadline. So yes, early action does in a weird way kind of benefit you financially speaking. I do talk about this in the new video we're popping up this week on the YouTube channel about the ED versus EA perspective from financial aid. Also, how do you think merit aid will... Unfortunately, the question is, if you do send in test scores and you have good test scores, how will it affect you getting more merit aid? I can't really answer this question because I don't know what schools you're talking about, unfortunately. Early action does affect financial aid. Once again, I'm going to post a video. It's about 10 minutes long, so I don't want to keep you guys here the whole time talking about early decision, early action. In your opinion, is Baylor generous? Baylor is generous, yes. Do private schools give same scholarships at the same level of private schools? Public versus private scholarship-wise. Once again, unfortunately, it's school-specific. Let me give you an example. If you score 1350 or above and you're going to Ohio State, they're going to give you at least $20,000 in scholarship money. If you score 1350 or above, going to South Carolina, they'll give you in-state tuition. So some private schools and public schools, some public schools will give you huge discounts depending on how you score academically on the SAT, ACT, even though many of you don't have it now. State schools do give scholarships. In DC, which schools are generous? Well, right off the bat, Georgetown is generous. George Washington is generous. American is kind of generous, not as generous as GW or Georgetown. And Catholic is generous. As far as generosity point of view, that's kind of like the heart of getting in, Georgetown and down. As far as generosity, it's Georgetown, George Washington, Catholic, and then American as far as generosity for DC for the question just asking. Thank you again for the comments. I appreciate it, guys. How helpful is legacy at certain colleges, specifically state schools like a Penn State? Legacy does not hold as much weight as it used to, unfortunately. It just doesn't. Now, it does help, but not as much as it used to. So you still need the academic, you need the rigor more than anything else. So from a state perspective, it's not as helpful as it used to be. From a private school perspective, legacy helps out on the high levels tremendously. Do Catholic schools, colleges provide more money for Catholic students coming from Catholic school? In some cases, yes. I know that Fordham has a specific scholarship for that. Loyola does. So some of the private schools do. Tufts is generous, yes. Most of the schools in Boston, I guess Massachusetts really, in the Massachusetts area are very generous. Thank you, guys. All right, it looks like it's it. All right, guys, I appreciate you guys staying on board, and thank you for all the help. Thank you once again for the comments. I'm going to see why my son is now screaming. Other than that, I appreciate everyone watching. If you wouldn't mind, once again, just watching the YouTube videos. It does help us. You guys subscribing helps us. You guys watching helps us. I appreciate if you guys just watch all the videos and just leave them running. It helps us tremendously. Other than that, again, guidance. I know you guys have stayed on here for the whole time. Thank you guys. Once again, I will be sharing this video with you guys. Thank you again.